My parents put me up for adoption as a kid because I was a boy. Now, they contacted me after 20 years, asking for money to fund my sister's education. I'm 25 and my story goes back to when I was 6, or rather, since the time I was born. I'm the third and youngest child of my parents. We weren't rich, but my parents made decent money to raise 3 kids. We lived in a small town in an ancestral house, which saved us a lot. My grandparents had a farm, so we didn't have to buy a lot of food. My dad is a truck driver, and he comes home every 3 or 4 days. My mom works as a waitress. They already had 2 daughters when they had me, so I was the unplanned one. I guess you can imagine how my parents felt about that. I didn't know about all that stuff when I was a kid, but as I grew up, I started understanding a little bit. My parents had a farm and they owned it. It supplied a lot of the things we needed in the kitchen. My dad was a truck driver and he came home every 3 or 4 days. My mom was a waitress. They already had 2 daughters when they had me. I was the unplanned one, and you know how parents feel when they have an unplanned child. I didn't know about all that as a kid, but as I grew up, I started understanding these terms a little bit at a time. It wasn't pleasant to know that I was unwanted. My parents wanted to get rid of me, but the doctor advised against it because it could have led to some major health concerns for my mom. My parents, especially my mom, wanted a girl. Her reason was very simple. She wanted me to use the discarded clothes of my older sisters so that she didn't have to buy new clothes for me. My 2 older sisters were a year apart, so they pretty much had the same size clothes interchangeably. It wasn't fun knowing I was unwelcome. My parents wanted to get rid of me, but the doctor said it could lead to health problems for my mom. My parents, especially my mom, wanted a girl because they wanted me to use my older sister's discarded clothes so they wouldn't have to buy new clothes for me. My 2 older sisters were a year apart, so they pretty much had the same size clothes. It was fun for them, but when I was born as a boy, my parents were disappointed. They hated me. They dressed me in girls' clothes and even sent me to school with my sister's discarded uniform. It was embarrassing for me as a kid. I was very small, but I still have a blurred memory of being bullied for wearing a girl's uniform and long hair. If I complained, I just got a thrashing. I had a rough childhood. When I was born, my parents were disappointed that I was a boy. They dressed me in girls' clothes and even sent me to school with my sister's old uniform. It was embarrassing. I was very small, but I still remember being bullied for wearing a girl's uniform and long hair. If I complained, my mom would hit me. I grew up hearing nothing but abuse and harsh words from my parents. I didn't understand most of it then, and I still don't understand it now. My dad was better than my mom, but he was often away and unreliable. Some days I thought he was neutral between all 3 of us. On some days he was as evil as my mom, if not more. I wasn't a saint kid. I remember being mad at them and feeling like they were always getting the best of everything, so I started acting out to get back at them. I was pretty evil to them because I felt like they were responsible for my misery. I was grounded a lot, and I'd end up skipping breakfast and getting dinner late. I know how a 6-year-old feels. There was one incident that I remember quite vividly, and I used to get really upset when I started realizing their biases towards me and my sisters. They always got the best of everything, and I got their leftovers. So, I started being mean to them because, as a kid, I held them responsible for my misery. Yes, I was grounded for my actions, sometimes quite severely. I had to make my own breakfast and was left without dinner on many occasions. I think I understand the pleas of a 6-year-old going through this. There was one incident that I remember quite vividly, and I think it was the game changer of my life that day or that week. I don't remember exactly, but I was being severely bullied in the playground for dressing up like a girl. I came home and found that my mom had brought some new clothes for my sisters for the holidays. I took a pair of scissors and cut them into confetti. I know I was wicked, and I'm not proud of what I did, but I was sick. My parents subjected me to trolling because of my gender. I remember being bullied for dressing like a girl. My mom came home with clothes for my sisters for the holidays, and I took scissors and cut them into confetti. I know it was wrong, and I'm not proud of what I did, but I was sick of being bullied because of my parents. I came from a place of pain, not evil. Instead of understanding my pain, my parents thought it was a sin that deserved the strictest punishment. They put me up for adoption, waited a month, but no one wanted me, so they were angry with me. I was constantly told how useless I was and that no one wanted me. There were times I heard my mom say that she wished she had gender-checked me. I would have never gotten him into the world. I come from a place of pain, not evil. My parents were so worried about my pain that they thought it was a sin and deserved the strictest punishment. They put me up for adoption, waited a month, but no one wanted me, so they got angry. They told me I was useless and no one wanted me. There were times when my mom said she wished I was a boy. I would have never gotten her into the world. It haunts me to know that my parents hate me so much for a reason that's not my fault. After some time, when there was no response for my adoption, they started talking about it to their friends and relatives. My dad knew someone in the next town who ran a food van with his wife. They were relatively poorer than us, but wanted a child. They were in their late 30s and had been trying for a child for more than a decade. But there was no luck. My dad spoke to my parents' disdain for me is so intense, and for reasons that are completely out of my control. After a while, they started talking about me to their friends and relatives. My dad knew someone in the next town who ran a food van with his wife. They were a bit poorer than us, but they really wanted a child. They were in their late 30s and had been trying for over a decade, but they weren't having any luck. Dad spoke to them and they agreed right away to adopt me. I remember the moment when Dad told Mom and my sisters. They were thrilled and excited to get rid of me. Dad also mentioned that they were poor and that I might never be able to go to school. Mom rolled her eyes and said, "Who cares? Just drop in there tomorrow." I stood there numb at the corner, holding the curtain. No matter how much I hated my family, I was scared and hurt having to leave them. I had tears. I was in my room, but I didn't make a sound. They were so happy they forgot I was there. When Dad saw me crying, he came over, rubbed my back and said, "Pack your stuff. We'll leave tomorrow morning for your new family." I cried out loud when he said this, but I realized they weren't listening. So I went to my room, packed my stuff, and prayed that my new family was less wicked. The next day, Dad drove me to. I didn't cry out loud, but I was pretty upset. They were so happy that they forgot I was there. When Dad saw me in tears, he came over, rubbed my back, and said, "Pack your stuff. We'll leave tomorrow morning for your new family." I cried out loud when he said this, but I realized that it was falling on deaf ears. So I went to my room, packed my stuff, and prayed that my new family was less wicked the next day. Dad drove me to the next town. I don't exactly remember the emotions I was going through, but I wasn't crying. Maybe I was just numb when I was leaving the house and throughout the drive. My new family was indeed poor. They had a tiny house with one room. They had renovated the storehouse into my room. I had no complaints because they at least made an effort to provide me with a room. I never had my own room or a bed. My sisters had a bed, and I was put up on. I don't remember the exact emotions I had when I left the last town, but I wasn't crying. Maybe I was just numb. When I left the house and during the drive, my new family was poor. They had a tiny house with one room. They had renovated the storehouse into my room, and I had no complaints because they at least made an effort to provide me with a room. I never had my own room or a bed. My sisters had a bed, and I was put up in a small closet at the corner of their room for my belongings. This room was smaller than our room, but it was cozy. My new parents, Mary and John, were warm and loving, but I came from a disturbed household. I had never experienced that love. Yes, I saw my parents showering their love on my sisters, but never on me. I used to doubt my new parents' intentions and thought their love was just temporary. I tried not to get attached to them because I feared there was a small closet in the corner of the room where they kept my stuff. It was smaller than our room, but it was comfy. My new parents, Mary and John, were nice and loving, but I came from a messed up household. I had never experienced that kind of love. I saw my parents showering their love on my sisters, but never on me. I used to doubt my new parents' intentions and thought their love was just temporary. I tried not to get attached to them because I was afraid they might also throw me away. Childhood trauma, you know? It took me many months to realize that they actually loved me and weren't just putting up a facade. Yes, my school was discontinued that year because my parents moved me here mid-session. But my new parents promised to get me to school next year. I witnessed how they worked extra hard to save money to get me into a better school, and that's when I started loving them back. My adoption turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I had a rough childhood, and it wasn't until I was much older that I realized my parents actually loved me. They'd put on a show for me, but I could tell they weren't being their true selves. My parents moved me to a new school mid-year, and that's when I met my new parents. They worked really hard to get me into a better school, and I started to love them back. It turned out that my adoption was a blessing in disguise. My biological parents never showed up after shipping me to Mary and John. To be honest, I was relieved because they treated me like a boy. Mary and John were very hardworking people. They worked 14 to 16 hours a day on their food truck, which was just outside their apartment. I wasn't left alone when they were working. I could see them right through my bedroom window. Eventually, I started spending my days on the truck, helping them with whatever I could. My parents were never around after they shipped me off to Mary and John. To be honest, I was kind of relieved because I was treated as a boy. Mary and John were super hardworking people. They worked 14 to 16 hours a day on their food truck, which was just outside their apartment. I wasn't left alone when they were working. I could see them right through my bedroom window. Eventually, I started spending my days on the truck, helping them out with whatever I could. When I got into school, I studied full-time, but I still helped them with chores whenever I was free. I was a little over 10 when I started helping John at the cash register. I was pretty good at math. I learned business and accounting from a very early age. After high school, I wanted to run their business full-time, but they insisted that I finish college first. They funded it with their savings because they were getting too old and weak to run a food truck. I wanted to take their responsibility the way they took mine, but they assured me they could manage for a few more years and I should pursue college. I studied business and accounting in college because I ultimately wanted to be an entrepreneur. My graduation day was the happiest day of my life. John and Mary were over the moon. They even asked my biological parents to attend the convocation, but they didn't show up. After college, I wanted to run the food van and let Mary and John retire, but I wanted to take on their responsibility. But they assured me that they could manage for a few more years and that I should pursue college. I studied business and accounting in college because I ultimately wanted to be an entrepreneur. My graduation day was the happiest day of my life. John and Mary were over the moon. They even asked my biological parents to attend the convocation, but they didn't show up. After college, I wanted to run the food van and let Mary and John retire, but they had planned something else for me. They had accumulated some nice savings, and he handed that over to me. I was overwhelmed with his gesture. He said they could survive on their own for a few more years, but they didn't want to drag me into this. He gave me the money to start a business of my own. I didn't want to blindly waste his money, so I used my business knowledge. I hunted for a small, local store at a good location that was struggling for sales. I asked the owner to lease it to me on a profit-sharing model, and after a few rejections, I got one. I started from scratch, renovated the place and menu to appeal to millennials and Yents, and offered excellent service. Sales went through the roof within a year, and I made double the profit on the investment. 4 years later, I have 3 cafes in the town running successfully. I upgraded Mary and John to a better apartment, and I had been living with them until now. I asked them to get rid of their food truck and enjoy their retirement, but they insisted on continuing it for their happiness. When I left the house with my suitcase, I never imagined myself to be a college graduate, but here I am running restaurant chains in the town. Fast forward to last month. It was a usual day at work. I was busy at the cash counter of one of the restaurants when I saw a familiar face. I felt as I thought it was a ghost, but it was my dad. I hadn't seen him in almost 20 years. He looked pale and weak, but he smiled and hugged me. There were customers, so I didn't say anything and took him to the corner. His face brought back all the scary memories of my childhood. I wouldn't have been able to write about my past if those memories didn't come back to life. He said he was happy and proud to see me successful in life, and I didn't know what to say. I stood there numb. He said he was passing by and met John, who told him about my successful business. He said he would get my mom on the weekend. I didn't say anything, and he left shortly after. After wrapping up my day, I went to John and told him that I didn't want to meet my biological parents, who disowned me for being a boy. They knew about my distress during childhood, and I wanted to. I thought about running away and hiding over the weekend, but Mary insisted that I forgive my parents and move on. I agreed to meet them, but only if Mary and John would be there too. So, my biological parents showed up at John's house. I thought they would apologize for what they did to me, but they didn't show any remorse. Instead, they started counting the favors I was owed to them. Mom said I should be thankful they found such good parents for me, who raised me to be a successful individual. I was shocked. I said I wanted to give it back to them, but Mary held my hand and signaled for me to calm down. I said, "I'm lucky to have John and Mary as my parents." I'd say the meeting was awkward. The next day, I got a call from my mother. I didn't recognize her voice. How would I know? It was the first time she had called me in 20 years. It was a demand for money. She said Dad had lost his regular job and she's been working on a contractual basis for years, but she also lost her job because apparently no restaurant needs a 50-year-old waitress. It was difficult for them to make ends meet. I asked how much she needed, and she said $20,000 would suffice. She had borrowed that money from her friends over the last few months to pay for groceries, and now her friends were asking for the money back, but she had none. I hung up the call, saying, "I'll think about it. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I don't like them, but I feel bad that people are chasing them for money. Sometimes I feel like she's just exploiting me. But what if they genuinely need help? I'll feel bad for letting them go through the embarrassment, even though I had the money." I appreciate all the comments and kudos. I got a mix of reactions from people about helping out my mom with $20,000. I then discussed it with Mary and John. Mary the first was happy to think about helping my parents out, but she also told me to be careful. JN said it was my money, so I should make the call. He also had the same fear as me that they were trying to use my emotions. After thinking about it a lot, I decided to take this first and last bet on my biological parents and made the transfer to her account. I felt good that I was able to help out my family, even though they were mean to me. I was probably right to be afraid they were going to take advantage of me financially, and they are indeed trying to. A week after sending the money, Mom called me again. I had mixed feelings, so I told her, "Thanks for the help. Your sisters want to meet you. When can you make it?" At that moment, I really felt that my family wanted me back. I know my parents wronged me when I was a kid, and I hated them, but I never hated my sister. As a kid, I might have done something wrong to them, but I never held them responsible. It wasn't their fault. Sometimes I even thought my parents got rid of me because they were poor, not evil. I told Mom we could meet on Sunday and I'd drive home. She said, "Why don't we meet outside?" I didn't think much of it and said, "Okay." She said she'd text. Location and time details will be shared later. After I hung up, I felt uneasy. I thought, why didn't she want me to visit home? It doesn't matter where you meet, but still, wouldn't you call your family after so many years instead of meeting them at a restaurant? Nevertheless, she sent me the restaurant's details, and it was one of the fanciest in town. I didn't think much at the time because I couldn't get past the fact that they didn't invite me over. I went to the restaurant where they were already sitting. My sisters rushed over to hug me. I was happy to see them after so many years. We had fun catching up with each other until the menu came and they started ordering food. They deliberately chose the priciest options. When they asked my dad what he wanted, he just grinned and said, "Order the most expensive one." My son is a big man now. That was so petty of them. He said that if John or Mary had said this, he would have been proud. But he thought it was mean and wicked for his own parents to say it. He couldn't do anything, so he just sat there watching them eat the food and spend all his money. He even paid the bill. He thought about ghosting them after the bill, but he thought that would be too cruel. He promised not to get into that emotional trap again. He was cold for the rest of the night. I'm pretty sure they didn't notice it when they left, and they didn't invite me over either. Instead, my older sister asked, "So, where are we dining next?" I faked a smile and said, "Nowhere," and waved them goodbye. I came back and told Mary about my greedy family. She was shocked to know that she's a very kind and independent woman. She found all this to be very disturbing. She advised me not to be a fool again and also not to think too much about them. To focus on my life, I did what my sisters called me after a week or so, but I didn't respond. My mom also called me, but I didn't respond. It's been 2 months since then, and now they've stopped texting or calling me. I think they got my hint that I didn't want them in my life. Update 2. Hello everyone. Thanks for all the love. As I mentioned in my last post, I stopped responding to my sisters and my biological parents because I understood they only wanted me for the money. Almost 5 months ago yesterday, she called me again. I saw the phone ringing, and I answered it. She started with small talk, asking about me and my work. It sounded so fake and pretentious that I couldn't bear it. I asked her what she wanted. She took a deep breath and said that my sisters had to drop out of college because their dad couldn't pay their tuition fees, so they wanted me to fund their college education. I lost my temper. She asked me to chill and said they were my sisters, my family, and that I should help them. I was at work at the time and didn't want to mess up, so I hung up. She called me again that evening, so I ignored the call a few times, but it was getting to me. Ignoring it wasn't going to work. I realized the next time she called, I answered. She asked, "Your sisters are very excited to rejoin their college, so how are we going about it? Will you be paying at one? I suggest you transfer the whole amount to me, shot or semester-wise, and I'll pay the tuition before each semester. You don't need to take the trouble." I was like, woohoo! Hold on, lady. I'm not going to make any payments. She was so surprised she didn't expect no answer. She asked, "What do you mean you don't want to pay? It's fine. We can manage in installments as well." I repeated, "I don't want to pay. Either way, my sister's education isn't my responsibility. My parents abandoned me, and they never checked up on me. You guys are talking to me just because you can take advantage of my money." She was angry, and she lost it when I said that we birthed you. Whatever you are is because of us. Your dad found a good guardian for you, and now that it's your turn to repay us, you can't shy away. Your responsibilities, your sisters, and your parents are your responsibilities, and you have to take care of all of us. I had a lot to say, but it was falling on deaf ears, so I just said, "Well, yes, I do owe a lot to my parents. That's John and Mary. They deserve all the credit for my success and for you guys. I don't know who you are, and none of my documents have your name. I don't have any photographs with you folks, so I don't think I know you all know she was hurling insults at me, but I told her she had the wrong number and hung up. Now, whatever you call me, selfish, cruel, or whatever, I'm not going to waste my hard-earned money on my so-called family. They were never my family. They got rid of me when I was just 6. And yes, I got comments in my last updates that I call John and Mary by their names and not Mom and Dad. Actually, I do call them Mom and Dad not immediately after coming to them. But when they got me to school and worked hard to take care of me and love me, I got attached to them and started calling them Mom and Dad. For the sake of this story, I'll refer to them by their names. John and Mary are my actual mom and dad. I don't call my biological parents anything because they don't exist for me now. On to the next story. Story 2. I found out my wife cheated on me with her app, which she met at a convention. So I exposed my wife and I got hitched about 5 years ago. We hit it off super well and always loved doing nerdy things together. She and I were both gamers, into anime, and loved nerd culture. She was the world to me and I thought things were good. We fell in love really fast, about 3 years before we got married. I met her at a convention and thought we'd be a match made in heaven. We started off talking about how much we love The Legend of Zelda and even discussed the latest chapter of One Piece. Some people look for the one they're playing to. That was her. We got married a little fast and had a really nerdy wedding where we even encouraged people to dress up. However, we didn't get a chance to go to conventions because of our jobs and how expensive they were. We rarely had a chance to, but I wanted to make our 5. We started off talking about how much we love Zelda, and then we ended up discussing the latest chapter of One Piece. Some people look for the one they're playing to, and for me, that was her. We got married a little fast and had a really nerdy wedding where we even encouraged people to dress up. However, we didn't get a chance to go to conventions due to our jobs and how expensive they were. We rarely had a chance to, but I wanted to make our 5-year anniversary special. I didn't make a lot of money, but I made enough to take care of her. I surprised her for her birthday with tickets to one of the biggest comic cons out there. It was one that people dreamed of going to. She was ecstatic and I was so excited to go. Now, I never did well with women. In fact, I could never really pick up on when they actually liked me until after. It was only after the fact that I realized it, even with my wife. It took me 3 long conversations on Discord to realize that she had the hots for me and wanted to get to know me better. When we went to the convention, things were great. A gal dressed as slave Princess Leia kept gushing over my stormtrooper costume that I put together at the last minute. After she left, my wife pulled me to the side, talking about how that gal was all over me. I told her I didn't even realize it. I was so bad about reading the room. After a few long chats on Discord, I finally figured out that she was into me and wanted to get to know me better. At the convention, things were great. A girl dressed as slave Princess Leia kept gushing over my stormtrooper costume, which I put together at the last minute. After she left, my wife pulled me aside and said she noticed that girl was showing a lot of interest in me. I told her I didn't even realize it. I was so bad at reading the room. My wife was a little frustrated, but we continued on with our day. It was a 3-day invention after all. We went to this meetup and that's when he came in. He was dressed as Han Solo. My wife, who was also dressed as Princess Leia, started talking to him. The two of them started talking a lot more, getting closer. I stepped in and mentioned I was the husband. The guy said it was nice to meet me, but I didn't notice the signs, and my wife was a little upset, but we kept going with our day. It was a 3-day event after all. We went to this meetup and that's when he came in. He was dressed as Han Solo and my wife, who was also dressed as Princess Leia, started talking to him. The two of them started talking a lot more, getting closer. I stepped in and mentioned I was the husband. The guy said it was nice to meet me, but he refused to make eye contact. After he left, I confronted my wife. She said there was nothing going on, and he was just a nice guy who liked my outfit. She was the bigger Star Wars fan, so naturally, she liked gushing out. I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing. The weekend continued. The next day, my wife woke up sick and exhausted. I said that I would go down and be back later. I left, but part of me couldn't shake what happened the other night. I didn't make eye contact after he left, and I confronted my wife. She said there was nothing going on, and he was just a nice guy who liked my outfit. She was the bigger Star Wars fan, so naturally, she liked gushing out. I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing. The weekend continued, and the next day, my wife woke up sick and exhausted. I said I'd go down and be back later. I left, but part of me couldn't shake what happened the other night. I chalked it up to maybe my own imagination. However, my wife wasn't answering my messages. We still had one more day before the end of the convention. I bought her something to give to her after I got back up. When I approached the room, I heard sounds, moans and such. I dismissed it, thinking it was maybe my wife. When I opened the door, I saw her there, looking at me. It was clear she did something. I confronted her, but she said there was nothing. I looked around, trying to find. I imagined that something was wrong, but my wife wouldn't tell me what it was. The next day, I went to the convention. I bought my wife something to give to her after I got back. When I got to the room, I heard sounds and moans. I thought it was my wife, but I didn't say anything. When I opened the door, I saw her there, looking at me. It was clear she had done something. I asked her about it, but she said there was nothing. I looked around, trying to find someone, but I couldn't. I didn't say anything. The convention passed, my wife grew distant. She worked longer hours and came home exhausted. I asked if she wanted to watch a movie together, but she said she was busy. I couldn't stop thinking about the moans I heard while my wife showered. I saw her Discord notifications were turned off. She never turned them off during the duration of our relationship, so something was wrong. I opened her phone, surprised that the passcode was the same, and I figured there was something up with my wife, but I brushed it off. The convention went on. My wife was distant, working longer hours and coming home exhausted. I asked if she wanted to watch a movie, but she was busy. I couldn't shake the feeling that I heard my wife moaning in the shower. I saw her Discord notifications were off, but she never turned them off during our relationship, so something was off. I opened her phone, surprised that the passcode was the same, and I began to read them. They were messages from the guy she met at the Star Wars meetup. He kept flirting with her, and they exchanged pictures. He even mentioned he wanted to role-play with her, and she was all about it. I angrily set the phone down and pretended like I never saw anything. My wife asked me if anything was wrong, and I lied and said I was fine. However, it wasn't fine. I researched how to get a divorce. This would be quite hard to serve, but I wanted to humiliate her and show her that I knew everything. I told her about another convention and how I wasn't going to be able to make it to this one. But she could go. Her eyes lit up slightly. Even though we wouldn't be together, this was my partner, someone that I wanted to be with forever, who just tossed me away. It was a gut punch, but I couldn't let her in on the day of the convention. I followed my plan. I did some research on I wanted to embarrass her and show her that I knew about the other convention and that I wouldn't be able to make it to this one. But she could go. Her eyes lit up slightly, even though we wouldn't be together. This was my partner, someone that I wanted to be with forever, who just tossed me away. It was a gut punch, but I couldn't let her in on it on the day of the convention. I followed my plan and did some research on this guy. They actually worked pretty closely together. I went to the convention and found them, of course, right in front of her favorite voice actors. That's when my plan came in. I watched them get in line and hid behind them. I wore a mask to hide my face, but I watched them like a hawk. When they got closer, the voice actor asked her about how she was. She pulled the man closer and said she was having a great day. They shared a kiss, and then that's when I actually worked pretty closely with this guy. I went to the convention and found them right in front of her favorite voice actors. That's when I had a plan. I watched them get in line and hid behind them. I wore a mask to hide my face, but I watched them like a hawk. When they got closer, the voice actor asked her how she was. She pulled the man closer and said she was having a great day. They shared a kiss, and then that's when I made my plan. I moved right in between them, pulled off the mask, and looked directly at my wife. She dropped her hand and looked at me. She asked what I was doing. I argued with her, saying that I caught her with him and that he cheated on me with him. She said that wasn't true, but I got the Discord messages, putting them right down on the table. The other attendees watched, shocked that I would even do something like this. However, I didn't want to let this go. I made my plan, moved right in between them, took off the mask, and looked directly at my wife. She dropped her hand and looked at me. She asked what I was doing. I argued with her, saying that I caught her with him and that he cheated on me with him. She said that wasn't true, but I showed her the Discord messages, putting them right on the table. The other attendees watched, shocked that I would even do something like this. However, I didn't want to let this go. I announced to everyone there that my wife was a cheater and that she cheated on me with this guy whom she also met at a convention. The celebrity stood up, said that he needed a break, and then disappeared. My wife's eyes filled with tears, and she begged me to listen to her. However, I couldn't. I told her that she lied to me, saying she was going alone. I told her that I knew about them meeting up about the late nights at the office gaming. I told everyone there that my wife was unfaithful and that she cheated on me with this guy she met at a convention. The celebrity stood up and said he needed a break. Then he disappeared. My wife's eyes filled with tears, and she begged me to listen to her. But I couldn't. I told her she lied to me, saying she was going alone. I told her I knew about them meeting up about the late nights at the office gaming. I called them one day and asked. They said they hadn't heard about a gaming night, since they were busy preparing for the holidays. My wife stood there, embarrassed. She told me she wanted an open relationship and had thought about asking me. I told her I didn't want to listen to this. She was upset too that I had stepped in like that. But I knew that she had messed up. We got home, and I grabbed my things, staying at a hotel. I called the girls one day and asked about a gaming night, but they said they hadn't heard anything because they were busy getting ready for the holidays. My wife was embarrassed and told me that she wanted an open relationship and had thought about asking me. I told her I didn't want to listen to this. She was upset too that I had stepped in like that. But I knew that she had messed up. We got home, and I grabbed my things and contacted an attorney so that we could get the paperwork ready to be filed. She tried to convince me to stay and that we should have an open relationship. She tried to say that I could sleep with other women and that she could sleep with men. I never wanted that, I wanted her. She was my player, too. My everything. My actions got traction, and someone recorded me embarrassing my wife and showed it all over social media. I proceeded with the divorce and got the house and I got all my stuff and talked to a lawyer so we could get the papers ready to file. She tried to convince me to stay and that we should be open with each other. She tried to say that I could sleep with other women and she could sleep with men, but I never wanted that. I wanted her. She was my player too, my everything. My actions got traction, though. Someone recorded me embarrassing my wife and showed it all on social media. I proceeded with the divorce and got the house and all our stuff. I sold it, though, because I didn't want to be reminded of the painful memories of the time we shared together. I don't know what happened to my wife. The nerd scene knew all about this, and it was a huge stink on Twitter and other places for a while. Her boss eventually found out because of what they saw, and I'm not sure if she stayed or not. Frankly, I don't care. My quest for love continues, but not with a cheating woman like her.